Welcome back to Adventure Pete. It's glad to see you here. So today we're working on doing the transmission service on our 2024 Chevrolet 2500HD. Now this is with the gasoline engine and the Allison 10-speed. So not the 6-speed, this is the new 10-speed transmission with no dipstick. So learned a lot. We got a lot of things going on with it, and this covers even the dreaded question, do you have to pull the exhaust out of the way to get the pan out? So if you look at it, the exhaust pipe's in the way. We're going to show you how to do that without having to remove the entire exhaust system on these trucks. So it didn't take much, just a few hand tools. Pry bar, long pry bar helps. Ratchet strap, show you that here soon. A 13mm wrench, ratcheting works out pretty nice. And then pretty much a quarter drive ratchet, 6-inch extension, 10mm socket, 8mm socket, does the trick. And then a 5/16 or 8mm Allen wrench. Safety glasses for dirt, dust, debris, things like that, along with a new pan, gasket, and filter. I have all the links in the description for everything you need, for all the part numbers, things like that. So that is what it took for us to do this transmission service, along with a little bit of time and a lot of fluid. So go with whatever type of fluid you want. This needs ULV fluid, so you can either buy the GM stuff, or I like Amsoil. I've always been a fan of Amsoil, so I switched to Amsoil ULV, and that's all it takes. So we're going to cover that here in a moment, so be sure to stay tuned. First thing we're going to do when we're down here is we're going to pull the standpipe plug. This is not the drain plug, because there is no drain plugs on this pan. This is for the standpipe that has the tube that goes up into the pan for checking level. So we're going to start by draining this to get the upper half of the fluid down to there, so when we pull this pan the rest of the way, it's not just making a bigger mess. So we're going to pull that first. That is a 10mm bolt. So pull that, we're going to let it drain. And then once we get that done, we're going to put the cap back in and start pulling pan bolts all the way around. Cute little bolt that it is with that big old flange. See a little bit of sparkles in there. Look at that. Looks like it was full. Well, that's what it's supposed to look like when it's not over full. So that's a good sign. So we're just going to put this plug back in and start pulling pan bolts. So now all these pan bolts are 10mm all the way around. So we're going to start pulling those out. The big question is that exhaust pipe. Is that going to be in the way or not? I have a feeling it's going to be in the way. I'm going to try to pull the pan without moving it, or figuring out what to do about it to see if it does fit, just for, you know, boy, that'd make life easy. But I am pretty sure I'm not going to be able to, but we're going to find out. So we're going to start by pulling all the bolts and try not to make a mess all over the garage. So what I like to do is start by loosening the bolts at the front of the pan. Just back them off a little bit, so that way I can try to control the drop of fluid. So as I work my way back, start with these loose and you start working down the side, and hopefully that controls all the fluid going forward. Obviously there's some bolts that are in the way. Taking these off a little bit more. Pan's pretty stuck on there, because all we got is the back bolts left holding it on. Normally pulling a pan of any other vehicle, it'd start leaking by now, but we have not. There we go. Now we got the pan tipping a little bit. Still no fluid. Obviously, since no fluid's coming out and the pan is separated, we're gonna stop the video and pull out everything across the sides, and except for one bolt in the front, and do the other side, so that way we have just a couple in the back and the one supporting in the front, so if anything does want to drop, it's not going to drop and make a mess, so that way we can control how this thing comes down. Alright, so now we only have one bolt up front, one bolt's loose in the rear. It is loosened up, nothing's leaked out of it yet, so we're going to do a little moment of truth here and see what happens. She's got some weight to her. Alright, it's just sitting on an angle on the exhaust manifold right now. We're going to let it drain out as much as possible, so we're not trying to hold all that fluid. Otherwise, normally when I drop a pan at an angle, I just shove my siphon pump in there and suck the rest of it out. But I was really curious to see what was in the pan itself, just for curiosity with these new transmissions. So that's why I did what I did, made sure I caught some of it, because I really wanted to dig through it and see if there's any sparkles. Otherwise, yeah, if you have a transfer pump or any kind of siphon pump, when you get it down to that angle, just suck it out. It makes life a lot easier on the backside. While we're waiting for this to siphon out, if you don't have your own automatic pump like I do that I built, you can always just go pick up one of these like primer ball suction tubes, just generic ones. Consider it like a consumable, because obviously you don't want to suck out old fluid and then use it to put the fresh fluid in. You can, I just prefer not to, so you can always just use it as a consumable, where you just take it, shove it in there, press the primer ball, and just suck it out that way, just to speed up the process. For a few dollars, you know, it could speed it up. If not, it's not a big deal. It's not like the end of the world. But just as a thought, if you like to have a couple of these on hand like I do, you can use it as a consumable and just consider it part of the cost of doing the change. But I have this extra one just in case I need to put fluid in. So now it's nice and loose, because there's no fluid left in it. We're going to try to pull this last bolt out and see if we can get this pan out without pulling the exhaust. I'm not very hopeful about it, but we're going to see what happens. Alright, so we're free. Nope. Disappointment ensues. She's not going to clear. Can't go left, can't go right, can't go over it. So, that's no fun. Well, I have a plan for plan B, so That's why I drained the fluid, because I knew this was going to happen. Now you can see it too, that it's just not doable. So here we go on to the next step. As you can see, we have successfully got the pan out with the exhaust still on. A little bit of trick to do it. So the first thing we had to do was take off the exhaust hanger up here. It spins around. It has a 13mm nut that goes on the outside of that bracket. You would see it normally right on the top there. Right on the top there where my light was. That's where you'd see it. And once you take that off, it just free spins. And that is that hanger. Once you get that hanger out, I moved down to this hanger as well and dislocated that. It may help to do the third one down the line too as well, but I did not. It's got some tension on it right now. But once you do that, the old trick of the ratchet strap around the exhaust. Just ratchet strap up and around, hook to the frame and crank it tight so it's just about touching. The exhaust is just about touching that cross member right there. She's got a lot of stress on her. She creaks a lot. This donut flange right there opened up a little bit to allow some water out, so I know it moved. You could probably take those nuts free if you wanted to. Take those free and allow that to move and pivot, but I never like to take those out because they're usually pretty rusty. Even with 16,000 miles and only being a year old, it's not looking pretty, so I left them. Save some little headache and heartache. Other than that, we have it down, so we're going to get this out of the way and start working on getting the filter out. So the filter is just mounted by two mounts. One bolt right there, and the other bolt is right there underneath the harness. Those hold the two legs. I'll hold it out. We're going to get that pulled out and get the new one in. Now that we got the two bolts out there, 8mm heads. One was back here, one was right here. They come out nice and easy. They're just short ones. They appear to be the same length, but I keep them in the same orientation so I don't lose them. This filter goes up into the pump that way, so you just gotta wiggle it out nice and slow, just like that, to get it out the rest of the way. You do want to make sure that you get the seal out. This does have a seal O-ring right there, so that's what goes up in the pump body itself, so you want to make sure you get that out as well. We're going to let this pour into here a little bit, because we're actually going to take this filter apart later and see what's inside, because I'm curious about it. But that's it for that right now. We're just going to set that off to the side. Not a big deal. So we're going to prep the surfaces for the new one, spray everything down, get everything cleaned up so we can put the new filter in and keep on moving. So this is what a new filter looks like. Nice little box style, looks exactly the same as Duramax. You can see the snout right there, and then the O-ring seal that they have with it. So make sure that gets all cleaned up, put in. Just want to make sure you saw what it looks like. Now with this filter seal, it tends to be easier to put this in first instead of trying to put it on the snout of this and then shove it in there. So once I get that in there, I'm going to take a little bit of fluid, make sure I get the snout nice and lubricated so it goes in there nice. It doesn't bind up, doesn't go in dry, doesn't cause any chafing or marring. We're going to get that ready right there. And then try to ease this in there. Just like that. You got to make sure that back tab is above the harness, otherwise it's not going to fit. And now we're seated all the way in there. Put the bolts back in. And started by finger. As a note, once I got both bolts just right up to where they were about touching, I took the filter and pushed the one last forward seat to make sure it actually got up and all the way so it wasn't hanging down and out and kind of got bound up with the plastic. So I made sure it was nice and pushed forward so everything looks like it sits where it should. And I tighten it up snug. Don't over torque these because this is the valve body. So before I clean out the pan, I want to show what it looked like. This is 16,000 miles on it, so not a lot. Has done some towing, nothing too over the top. And you can see in the corners here, it's not much. It's just part of the machining. That's just what it looks like. Down here, the fluid is not bad. There's nothing really sticking to the bottom of the pan. And as far as the magnets themselves, they do have debris on them. A decent amount, nothing terrible, but you got the two magnets. They do have a debris. That's what is interesting to see, and seems quite a bit, but I'm sure there's gonna be more. I'm guessing that's a lot of break-in. This is the standpipe we were talking about that doesn't go all the way to the top of the pan. That's why it's not a drain plug. So that's what a standpipe looks like, and this is what the inside of the pan looks like with 16,000. It's got material on it, not a terrible lot, really fine dust, but just want to show what the pan looks like before we clean it out and get everything going. And moving on. So we have a new gasket right here. It's a nice one of those steel core ones. This is directly from GM. It is pinned, so it goes in the right location every time, so it makes it easier for reassembly of everything with the pan. So as a note, since this is under warranty, I usually use like some ultra gray or something like that, some silicone, just to seal across the surface to make sure it doesn't leak. But since it's under warranty, I'm not doing that in case it ever went to the shop and got pulled. I don't want it to get flagged and then no longer be warrantyable. So I'm going to put it back together the way it was from the factory, just steel core gasket, and hope it doesn't leak. So it only fits through if the pan gasket's out of place. And once you get it in, you got to reset the gasket. Side set, that side set. That's all in there. Make sure the fluid's cleaned off of this bottom surface. Just for seat. And that side's not in the right hole. In. And that side's in. All right. Obviously we're going in gracefully on camera, but once we got it up in there, we're just going to use a couple bolts just to hold it in place while we go and get the rest of them. One's there. There. So everything's in place. We'll double check to make sure everything looks like where it should be all the way around. Start putting bolts in, start tightening back up. All right, pan's on, bolts all torqued down. So the way I do it is set the pan up there and put all the bolts in, finger tight them so I make sure everything's now pressed in nice and evenly all the way around. Then I go through initial, just quick turn all the way around to get the initial set. Then I go through and torque everything back to spec, which I do about 10 foot-pounds. And then, or less, just use your judgment because these are small bolts. So really the key is the sequence that you do it in, because they all have that steel core gasket, so you can't compress it beyond that little washer that they always put in all the ends. So sequence is what matters. So I always start in the middle and kind of do a rotation and work my way out. So it ends up being a spiral. So you start with right here, then go there, and then back to here, then there, and just kind of keep going a spiral all the way around to end up getting everything tight. And then once I get everything tight in sequence, I'll go through and just go one by one, just double check everything just to make sure, because I want to be sure that this thing doesn't leak. And so that's what I do. So next thing we got to do is we got to fill it and put the exhaust back together. So I'm going to put the exhaust back together first to make sure I don't make a mess of it or forget, and then try to start up with a ratchet strap still on it. So we're going to go back up in here and put that clamp back on after we release the ratchet strap. So since this is under tension, we got to be careful when we release this that we don't pinch or cut off a finger. Then we got the hanger to put back on next. Our ratchet strap is off. Our hanger is back on. A little bit of grease on there makes it go a lot easier. And then just push it back on with the pry bar. And then right down here, the nut is put back on. You can see that little nut right there with the green paint on it. The nut's put back on, so that mount's put back on. All we gotta do is put fluid in the trans. So there's two ways you can do it. And one way is taking out the standpipe plug right there and then adding fluid in through that. And you can kind of push it up in, and then whatever spills out, spills out. Or you have the fill plug right here on the side. So this is not the fill plug you just fill till it pours out of, because this is higher than the actual standpipe. So you see this with a lot of videos out there. You don't just pour in here till it pours out of there. That is wrong. It goes in through the stand, it goes in through here, and then when it pours out the standpipe, it is full. That is proper spec for checking the fluid in these. So we're gonna get that plug out and start going to town. 8mm or 5/16 Allen wrench gets the fill plug out. 10mm gets the standpipe bolt out. So there's a couple different ways you can get fluid in here. So if you buy the Amsoil bags, you can usually just cram up there and squeeze the crap out of them and fill them through the top there and make a little bit of mess, but it's easy to do that way. Or you can do it the easier way and get one of these cheap fill tubes. All you gotta do is squeeze the primer ball, shove one end in there, and fill it till you need to. That's one option. Just use it, consider it consumable. That's what I'm going to do with this, and we're going to start with the truck off, fill it up top until it starts dripping out the standpipe. Once it gets there, we're going to start the truck, test it, verify it, and then fill some more in there, and we're going to do it while it's running afterwards. So right there, it's just starting to drip out. That's what we're looking for. Now we're going to start it up. So far we have 8 quarts in as per dealership spec. Not what online says, but that's 8. That's what we like to see. So as a note, before I started this truck, I put the standplate plug in, and then I also put the plug in on the side there as well. They're just in a couple threads on that one, and that one just spun up by fingers till it touches, just so it's not pouring oil out. The reason I did that is just so on startup, in case there's any vacuum where it wants to suck in air, it's not sucking in dirt and debris, especially being right up next to this hot exhaust. I don't want it to suck in any dirt and dust. That's anything that's above the truck going into that. And as a note, what I also did is, because obviously when you start a truck, it's going to suck the fluid up there, it's going to fill the fluid filter in the system and things like that. What I didn't want to do is, because it's right next to this nice hot exhaust, I don't want to have to keep putting in there and checking it and going back and forth while it's running. So having a standpipe's not too bad of a deal to work with. So ideally, if it's running, you open the plug and whatever pours out, and it pours out till it stops, and voila, you're done. That's all it takes to do the transmission fluid and filter on these trucks. I'll make sure to have all part numbers in the description, so everything you need to do this job. So it was pretty easy. Otherwise, just the hardest part was getting the exhaust out of the way, trying to make sure you do that right and trying to finagle that exhaust pan in and out of there. So it took a couple hours to do this job. Not a big deal. I was trying to take my time, make sure that everything got done right. The keynote that is very imperative is to make sure you check the fluid level in the transmission at operating temperature. Operating temperature that they specify is 167, 175 degrees. So the way to get it to temperature is you can sit there and let it idle, but you're never going to get there. So I put mine in drive, put my foot on the brake, and idled up to 1,000 RPMs, on and off a few times to get it to where it worked up to that temperature, and then stayed there. And you still got to check it with it running. So beyond that is just, you got to make sure you have the right kind of fluid. We use you got to use ULV, and I like Amsoil. You can go with the GM stuff, and that's fine. I like Amsoil, so that's the way I went, and that works for me. With that is you got to make sure to check the fluid at operating temperature, because this fluid does expand a lot when it heats up. So that's why you have to check it at operating temperature at the standpipe. So you can put it in there until it's cold and fill it up, but you're going to have some spillover, which actually works out okay because that hot exhaust being right there, it kind of sucks. So that's the way I kind of did it, whereas I overfilled, knowing I was going to lose some, and then as it heated up, I pulled the plug on the drain plug on the standpipe, and it poured out until it was done, and then I put the plug back in, and that's all it takes. So it's super easy to do. You just got to know how much to put in there. This truck took about 9 quarts. So if you want to be on the safe side, order 10. Pour it all in there, and then whatever comes out at operating temperature, you're done. So it's actually pretty easy to do with the standpipe. You're not guessing where there's cross hatches, things like that, which sometimes is the challenge with a dipstick tube. And especially when you're pouring in the tube, you got to let that settle out. Otherwise, when you're trying to pull it in and out all the time, it can be very challenging to get an accurate measurement. So it's really not too hard to do on these trucks. It just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of know-how to get around the exhaust issue. Other than that, not too bad of a afternoon's worth of work. So hopefully you can like the video, comment, tell us what you think, tell us what you want to hear about, and subscribe. We got a lot of great content coming, a lot of great content on the channel, so be sure to check it out. And remember to have a great adventure.